clear and that people are in here.
You're live, but not live.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dory Vecchio. I'm the interim town manager for the town of Auburn. I am here upon the request of the Board of Selectmen, they asked me to hold a meeting with you to allow the residents in the Athens Street area to voice their concerns and comments regarding the 40B proposed project at the end of Athens Street. This meeting is going to allow us to take notes and to provide this information to the state, Mass Housing, so that they take all of your concerns into consideration. I have been in touch with a couple of residents already who have given me a lot of feedback. So even after this meeting, if you think of something else, please call my office and I'll add it to the letter. Right now, after tonight, once we compile all your comments and concerns, I will prepare an item for our Board of Selectmen. It'll go to their meeting next Monday, where they will read the comments and have a chance to review them. This isn't a public hearing. It's being taped so that we can tape it again if we need it to. We'd like to keep comments 3 to 5 minutes, although I know this is a very difficult topic of conversation for everyone. We want everyone to be able to speak, but we'd like to keep comments to 3 to 5 minutes if you can. Town employees and officials are here. We have Board of Selectmen here, we have people from different committees here, and we have town employees here. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to answer all your questions. 40B is a state program, not a town program, but we have gone through quite a bit of training, and we're learning, just like you, unfortunately, now, all the ins and outs of 40B. So what we can't answer tonight, we will get back to you. You'll see a clipboard come around. Please sign in so that if you do have a question, I can get back to you and I can respond to your answers if we're not able to respond tonight, okay? There are documents that I left. When you walked into this room, there were some documents there. One of them is actually the applications for Athens Street for the 40B development, so that you have that. It is on our website as well. There's also a barcode that you can scan. If you want to see it, you can scan it on your phone. And there is also a training that the ZBA did beginning of February that we went to that has a lot of information regarding 40B. It's basically a crash course in 40B, and it might be something you want to look at as well. Now, that is also on our website and for your review. I have spoken to Senator Moore and State Rep Paul Frost. Senator Moore was not, it wasn't intentional, but he was not invited to this meeting. He does have a prior commitment, though, but he did state that he would love to come to a board meeting and talk about 40B in general. There are a lot of questions regarding his position on 40B. He's more than happy to share that with you, so I'm sure we'll have additional meetings regarding that. I do have a statement from State Representative Paul Frost that I'd like to read to you. As you're aware, Mass Housing doesn't actually, I don't know where to start. I'll just start from the top. Dear Auburn Interim Town Administrator Vecchio, thank you for the invitation to attend a public meeting to discuss the proposed 40B development on Athens Street this Monday, March 3rd. I cannot attend as I have a previous commitment in Oxford. As you're aware, I did attend the walkthrough on Athens Street last week. If you would be so kind, please read this correspondence at the meeting if acceptable to the process. As you and the Auburn Select Board know, the community can express concerns and make comments to Mass Housing as it reviews a developer's initial application for a 40B. As you are all aware, Mass Housing doesn't consider schools or the impact on education system like it should, but they do take into account public safety and conservation among other factors. I expect the community will express these issues. Another aspect I believe the community may take issue with is the size and scope of the proposed project as it fits the neighborhood. This is something Mass Housing is supposed to look at. The big question is, does the design of the project fit this neighborhood? For what it's worth, my answer is certainly not, but I don't make that decision. With the proposed units being 4 stories high, there is a very reasonable argument that this project doesn't in any way, shape, or form fit the housing units, single-family homes, already on the street. There are no other existing multi-level condos or apartments on Athens Street. I cannot promise this will reject the application to Mass Housing. It is possible if Mass Housing agrees about the concerns above, they could consider a smaller project, but it's worth highlighting. 40B is very frustrating, to say the least. Attempts to even modify its legislation have not been successful. I would argue it has become more difficult for communities. Last year, I offered an amendment to have mobile home parks count towards the affordable housing stock of a community, which was unfortunately soundly defeated. I was told it was an end around 40B. I would also point out, if it hasn't been done already, Mass Housing is an independent, quasi-public agency created in 1966 for affordable housing initiatives. Should Mass Housing approve the application or is in a modified way, the process would then continue with the town where public safety, conservation, zoning, and other concerns are still relevant. Thank you for the opportunity to provide input as part of this process. And as I said before, both Senator Moore and Representative Paul Frost were at the site visit on Athens Street. They're both very committed to working with you and with us. They've been a very much a support, so I just want to let you know that. I would like to start with introductions around this table so that you know who you're talking to. Thank you. I would like to have everyone introduce themselves, and then I would request that one by one, as you have comments, if you could come up, you can come to the podium. Please state your name and your address, and please make sure you fill in the sign-in sheet as well. Like I said, we want to be able to get back to you with information. If we could start at the end here, and we'll go through your name and your title, please.
Good evening, Scott Mills. I'm the Deputy Police Chief.
Todd Corain, Select Board Member.
Steve Chambers, Select Board.
Ann Kavanaugh, Select Board.
Hi, Steve Coleman, Fire Chief.
Dory Vecchio, Interim Town Manager.
Gary Aller, Building Commissioner, Zoning Enforcement Officer.
Joanna Paquin, DPW Director, Town Engineer.
Good evening, Darlene Coyle, Inspectional Services Director and Development, and also Health Director.
Dan Carpenter, Member of the Board of Selectmen.
If we just want to make sure that we keep the doorway clear, so there are some seats, I can see at least 3 seats here, but if you're going to stand, if we could stand along this side wall here, we need to make sure that we keep the entrance clear. Thank you.
So again, the conversation tonight is, although 40B is such a huge issue for the whole town, tonight is about Athens Street. It's about the Athens Street proposed project, and we want to hear your concerns about that. So I don't know who wants to be the first one to break the ice, but we'd love to hear your comments, and please state your name and your address when you come up. Come on up.
There's 2 seats in the front, and then there's 2 seats right behind as well.
Hi, good evening. My name is Kim Meyer. I live at 37 Appleton Road. So if you go up Appleton from 20, I am used to be the 5th house on the left. I think I'm now the 3rd. My biggest concern is, so my backyard will go right up where the plan is. I'm really concerned about flooding of the backyard, because my end of my backyard, we've been in our house 25 years, and there has just been more and more flooding happening, I think just over time, but I am concerned that this is going to be an issue as things get built. Not to, there's also the view, but that's a different conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Come on up.
My name is Deborah Barrera. I live at 22 Appleton Road, which is on the corner of Route 20 and Appleton, and my biggest concern about this is the safety of it all. I've lived there 30 years. We have at least one accident a week, if not a day. and I don't have the exact numbers of that, but if we were to add 192 units, maybe 192 cars or twice that, you cannot fit 200 cars even up Appleton Road and around Prospect Street. It will not fit if you do the math. So that means the traffic light, which doesn't really sync up every time we have a power outage, it does not sync up so that two places can go. On Prospect Street, they made it better by making 3 lanes, a third lane so you can turn. On Appleton, there isn't one. And when both lights go across, both people have the right to go turn. Both people thinks they're right, which they are, but I've brought it up to the state. Every time there's an accident, I go out and tell the police officers that are there, and they said, well, tell somebody. I repeatedly, for 30 years, have told people, even the state has come out and watched it, and they said, you can't do that on the interstate. And I said, they do. But if you look at it, it's a safety issue. You cannot add 200, never mind 400 cars to that area.
Thank you. Please.
Excuse me, I have a little bit of laryngitis today. My name is Lisa Wass. I live on 90 Appleton Road, and I concur with the other two ladies who just came up with the traffic issue and the watershed. When they built the property, all the houses on Prospect Street, they, I don't know the correct word, but they moved the water. And the water is now, much of it is over where these other people live on the other side, and that's going to have to be moved again. My concern also is that the fire department is going to be where Chuck's Steakhouse used to be, which is not a problem for me. But again, the accidents that are at those two intersections are constant, and some of them have been very serious. And so with the fire department there and the extra traffic on Appleton Road and Prospect Street and Route 20, there's going to be more accidents, I believe. And plus, when the fire department needs to get out of there, I would assume that that area would have to be shut down as far as the traffic flowing. And we already have a problem with traffic, especially in the summer, coming off the pike and getting on the pike, and it's not safe. And for one more thing, I'm concerned about the schools. The schools are almost at capacity, and when you're putting in over 150 units, there's going to be more children. Where are they going to go? The teachers they're working really hard. They've been hit with a lot these past few years, and there's just not enough room in the schools anymore. And that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Please.
Hi, Rich Jane Grandy, and I live at 10 Athens Street. And obviously, you have a picture at my house, so if you go to page 9 and flip the page before it, you'll see the house. I have a couple of concerns. One of them is water coming down the hill. It's a huge hill there, and I don't remember how many years ago, but somebody supposedly sold some of the land there, and they started putting foundations in, and we've got all kinds of water in our yard and in our basement. And that was only by building 2 foundations, which they never actually didn't even complete them. They just dug the holes and cleared out some of the trees. And I also have concerns. It's such a narrow road, and that's the only entrance and exit, how that's going to handle all that traffic. We're probably in the neighborhood of 350 cars, 192 units, and let's face it, people nowadays, you get a married couple, they have at least 2 cars, if not more. And not only the traffic on Athens Street, but like one other woman was talking about, Appleton Road, that light, that can't handle the traffic. And I can only picture people in the morning trying to get to work, driving through there, backing up all the way to Athens Street and all the way on Appleton at the light. Don't know how it's going to handle the traffic. I really don't. So I think that's all I have.
Thank you so much.
Hi, good evening, Robert Tatro, 4 Ridgewood Drive. First of all, thank you for holding this meeting. I'm not in a butter, but obviously I've been involved in this process for over 15 years now. And one of the things that kind of disturbs me, quite frankly, is you always hear the conversation is you're not allowed to talk about the schools. And so basically they're giving you a one-sided conversation. You can't talk about the schools. Well, guess what I'm going to talk about tonight? I'm going to talk about the schools because I know they tell me I can't. So when you're looking at 1,700 apartments total, okay, roughly speaking under state guidelines, because that's what they're looking at, by the way, it's 10%. So we're 16,000 households. We're talking roughly, we'll put it in there, let's just say 1,500. The average student capacity for that, they'll probably estimate about 150 students per location. We're looking at realistically, and I'm just throwing crazy math off the top of my head, probably 600, possibly 800 students. I don't know. I'm just throwing numbers out. Somebody that's much quicker than that can take care of that for me. So that's at 25 students per classroom. That's 8 classrooms. That's 8 teachers. That's 8 teachers' aides. That's 8 retirement packages. Where are we putting these students? Are we going to put trailers behind the schools again? Because that's what we had up on Packagug 15, 20 years ago when they were at capacity and we were waiting for new schools then, right? Then we have to talk about the police. We're going to have, hypothetically speaking, 6 new locations. That's going to be a minimum of 2 officers per shift, I'm assuming. And again, I'm not going to speak on behalf of the police department, but I think that's very realistic to expect. So that's 6 retirements, 6 cruisers, $650,000 of outfitted and training and retirement. Not to mention, it was very interesting today that the Auburn Youth and Family Services just had their fees go up to rent everything from $30,000 to $90,000. Now, who are they serving? They're serving the lower, less fortunate members of the community that we are allegedly here trying to help. But we're going to increase their fees by 3 times. And who does that reflect back on? But nobody but the parents of these kids who can't afford to do this to begin with. I think we're kind of defeating the purpose here, right? We're kind of robbing from Peter to pay Paul, and it's not working. So that's where I have the concerns of all this. Right now, realistically, just off the top of my head, in the next 5 to 10 years, everybody in this room that owns a home, I will guarantee you that your property taxes will be up probably $300 to $500 over the next 10 years as a result of these projects and the hidden costs associated with it that we will all absorb because our fire department will have to be larger, our police department will have to be larger, our schools will have to be supplemented, and who pays for that? Homeowners do. So what this results in is taxation without representation as far as I'm concerned. So I'm going to leave it at that because I think overall, the rest of the people in here can talk about the individual little small parts of their neighborhood, but at some point in the future, I imagine I'll be seeing you all at a meeting. So see you in a few weeks, probably. So thank you very much for your time and have a great night.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Shannon Lipko, and I own 2 homes in town, but I reside at 3 Old Meeting House Road. So that's sort of a tough comment to follow, but I'm going to try my best. I actually have a formal letter this evening to submit to the Board of Select to address several issues that I have that time constraints will not allow me to raise this evening, so I'll just focus on the most important ones as I see it as an abutter. First of all, as the gentleman mentioned, that the proposed project at Athens Street would be zoned for Packagug, which is already approximately 100 years old as a school, and it's already operating with a trailer and a gym that also functions as the cafeteria. When I moved to Auburn and I purchased that home, I didn't envision seeing another 200 plus units built on a small street where all of the homes will egress to. Just to put it in perspective, you're talking about 500 vehicles that can only egress onto Athens Street, which connects to Appleton Road at one of the shortest lights in town that has had fatality accidents there and is one of the highest hotspots of mass crashes per MassDOT. Additionally, Prospect Street has no sidewalks. and the section where you would have people that might want to go out and walk their dogs or go for a walk with their children, where do you propose we're going to build those sidewalks? Do you intend on taking some of the land via eminent domain from the neighbors that currently live on Prospect? Or do you intend on developing the sidewalks on the wetlands that are currently there? Further, AA Transportation, who gives the bus service here in Auburn, was one of the only, if not the only, bus company to give a bid this year to APS, drives down Appleton Road as well as the very end section of Athens Street. How in the world is the bus going to be able to navigate into that area properly to pick up the students at peak hours safely and effectively? Additionally, I want to talk about the water district. All of the residents that currently live close to the water towers, such as myself, have very low water pressure compared to those in other parts of the town. When you bring 500 plus people to those units pulling a draw, particularly at peak hours, onto the water in our area, are we supposed to sustain a reduction in our service? Are we supposed to pay for booster pumps and expansion tanks and the electricity to run them 24 hours a day because the developer seeks to make a profit by putting a unit of this huge size, ill-fitted for that neighborhood, right near us? I think not. That could potentially lead to further class action lawsuits. And I also want to raise whether or not Toyota has been consulted on any of this. Because as the residents have made clear, they've suffered damages from the water that definitely does exist there, because DPW frequently has to come down and chip away at the ice dams that result on the corner of Appleton Street and Athens Street. So what I want to know is, since Auburn already seems to be having some trouble maintaining and drawing sustainable businesses here, do they intend on making Toyota's life more difficult? Just so you're aware, Toyota only has 2 side lots, one of which is locked, and that's the one on the corner of Prospect Street. Multiple times a day, you'll see people pulling U-turns there in the middle of the road because they think they can turn into Toyota rather than going in the front of Toyota because it's a crash spot once again. Okay? So where will they go? Where do they currently go? They go onto Appleton Street. So now you want to divert maybe 500 cars at the point of an emergency to a point where you have maybe room to realistically fit 5 vehicles, and the Toyota lot entrance is right there? That doesn't make a lot of sense. I'll say in closing as well that I'm not here to debate the merits of 40B. I understand it's cards that are dealt by the state. But nonetheless, the town has the ability to play those cards and has a mandate to do so in a way that mitigates the negative impacts on its residents. I do believe that the town of Auburn should be approaching its 10% mandate if it hasn't already. I respectfully request that the town support a moratorium on further building to reassess where we currently are in terms of that 10%. Mobile homes might be counted in on affordable housing. In fact, the Attorney General just made new regulations and guidelines available on that because those folks are being hammered by greedy corporations increasing their fees. I think that if we take a pause on this and we look at it as a town, we'll see what makes sense not just for now, but what might exist as the future in 5 years from now. Massachusetts is experiencing an out-migration, which has been the case since pre-COVID. The only reason our population increased last year was due to the influx of migrants to the state. That might not be permanent. And it certainly shouldn't be something we base our census numbers on and when we determine where we are at in terms of the 10% MBTA mandate. Thank you for your time. Take care.
Thank you. If I may, just as a follow-up to that, we are watching the numbers very closely for Safe Harbor. It has been tracked. It's tracked at the state level, and it's tracked here in the town of Auburn. We are currently only at 5.24%, but as Albert Street, as you know, that's already being developed. Once that is complete, we'll be at 9.8%. So we're getting there. As you know, the biggest issue with 40B is that these developers can come in and bypass our bylaws. Our bylaws are established to protect you as residents. They have to just follow state law. So it is up to us, whether it's the homeowners or whether it's us sitting up here, to help to mitigate the damages for anyone else that comes into town, whether it's Athens Street or another location. But we are getting close. We monitor it. Each time a certificate of occupancy comes on board, we're able to add that to the list. We can't do it until that happens, but it's something that we keep a very close eye on, because it does make a difference on where we go with the town. So thank you so much for that, previous speaker. Sir?
Good evening, everybody. Dave Holness, 2 Athens Street, so first house on the right when you're on Athens Street. Just to piggyback onto the sentiment that was previously discussed, I just want to address some safety issues, but before that, I just want to thank you guys for your service to the town. I know oftentimes that probably feels thankless, especially in situations like this, so for what it's worth, thank you. With that being said, I do live on Athens Street. I access Appleton. It's very dangerous on a good day. The topography of the road and how it comes down the hill gets extra steep right before it hits Route 20. It is scary. Anybody who lives in the area understands that it's scary. It's scary to the point that whenever possible, I go on Appleton. I'm sorry, I go on Prospect on the other side. I always take the long way, and I have good reason for that, because I've had situations in the winter where trying to stop at that light, not speeding, I crawl down that, you hit a sheet of ice, and the next thing you know, you're sideways in Route 20. There's another member of my household whose car was totaled, and thank God they're still alive, when somebody ran the light on Route 20 and took the front end of their vehicle off. And at that time, the camera wasn't working, and I don't think the camera is working either. The other issue for safety that I want to address is if you're traveling westbound on Route 20 to make the left-hand turn going up Appleton Street. See, people are making noise. There's this little magic dip between the 99 and the Hertz, where if you're headed westbound on Route 20 and you're trying to make that left to turn in, cars coming eastbound kind of fall into a little dip, and it's like a little bit of an optical illusion. So as you're making the left, depending on how fast that car's going, you could end up in a kill spot situation. And trust me, I am super cautious, and on a regular basis, there's always some kind of scenario like that. And that's just with the current traffic. I can't imagine adding 500 more cars to that, because it would probably cause a lot of people to want to go on Prospect, because that is clearly the safer way to go. I live on the end of Athens, and I don't want to go down Appleton if I can help it. It's scary. It just seems really dangerous. And I brought up a question the last time, the last meeting that was here, and I didn't get an answer, and I'm not faulting you guys for that. It seems like that the answer for this is intentionally obfuscated. What is the threshold for safety? Because one of the stipulations of whether or not they put a 40B somewhere is environmental concerns at the state level and safety at the state level. So what is the state concerned with? Are they concerned with acute safety, like I slide into Route 20 and die? Or are they concerned with long-term safety, like runoff from this new development contaminates our reservoir at the bottom of the hill and potentially endangers species? Because I see a myriad of ways where this doesn't fit the community on top of its size and the volume. And to be personal with this, I don't oppose 40Bs. I don't even oppose the 40B for that particular location, but I do oppose that 40B accessing the street. The street's too narrow. It's difficult on a good day, and not even in the winter. Like, the school bus picks up there and it does this bizarre K-turn thing where it's got to back into Athens Street and turn around. I can't imagine them being able to do that with 500 cars up and down the road. There are just so many things that seem to be really incompatible with that particular location in the current scope that they have proposed. So is it possible to revisit the scope of this and kind of bring it down to something that would be, complementary to the community? I know a bit of a ramble there, but my overall question is, what's the threshold for safety? What dictates that this is safe and this isn't? And I know you guys probably don't have that answer from the last meeting that we had, but who has that answer? Who decides that? Can they come here and explain this to us?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have the same question you do. We don't know what their threshold for safety is, but we're very well aware, just like what you said, they're interested in conservation, they're interested in safety. We are doing, the people at this table and a lot of people that aren't at this table, whatever we can to stress the safety issues that everyone here is talking about, but also what our DPW sees, what our building commissioner sees, the gentleman there on the end, what he sees, the interesting comment about westbound on Route 20. I didn't know that. Like, that is a really big issue. And this letter that the state gets, it's going to be interesting, and I will post it online so everyone can see it, because it's going to be very lengthy. It's going to include all of what you guys are saying, because these issues need to be looked into. So I appreciate your comments, and I wish I had the answer for you. As soon as we get it, and the fire chief just mentioned, you can speak for yourself if you want.
I've asked, for those that were standing on Athens Street that day, you heard the gentleman from the state say, we take things like safety into consideration. I have asked that gentleman, and I have asked the state, can you tell me what that means? Can you give me an example of what may occur that you would deny a project from a safety-related aspect? And they can't give me one. So I wish we had the answer for you. I don't have it myself. I've asked that pointed question, and they can't come up with some definitive thing that could occur from a safety perspective on what would cause them to deny a project.
That being said, we will continue to seek the answer. We're not going to stop asking. Safety for our residents is a top priority, and it does come in multiple forms, like you said. So, thank you. Anyone else? Please.
Evening. My name's Kenneth Clements. I live at 46 Appleton Road. I've lived there for 70 years, born and raised there. At the end of Athens Street, these 400 supposedly cars will be coming down Athens Street with their headlights on, heavens knows what hours, into my kitchen. Should be an interesting thing if that ever shows up. But back to the safety issues of the cars on Appleton Road, since there doesn't really seem to be a second egress planned onto Prospect Street, and I don't wish that on Prospect Street. I've been hit twice on 12 and Route 20 on Appleton Road. Once years ago, totaled a van. I even remember the kid's name who hit me. And not just, I think it was about 2 years ago, I was hit again on Appleton Road. Car ran the red light coming. What was he? He was heading eastbound in that funny little dip and took me out. So, and other houses on the road, well, unfortunately, since I am 70, most of them have passed. DePinto's house got hit there. Downing's house, they got in an accident there. Oren's house, they got in an accident there. And I can go on and on over the years of all the people who have been nailed on Appleton Road. And that was long before we have the overhead lights and all this new stuff now that doesn't really seem to be helping. So that is my main concern. And if you want to talk about water, yes, I do know, with 70 years of being childhood, growing up in that neighborhood, and seeing people literally going into their backyards of the houses on Athens Street, digging trenches by themselves in their backyard, thinking they're going to dig a trench and fill it full of gravel and run the piping down. And yeah, several of the houses, I've watched them physically dig their own trench in their backyard for drainage. And I understand some of these houses now have these sump pumps that you put in your cellar, and they dig a trench around the inside of the foundation to dry the water out. And a couple of years ago, a couple of town men, workers from the Highway Department volunteered to come up and dig up Appleton Road on the steep part. Thought they were going to cure the water problem. It's still there. And now our road is also dug up and patchwork, and not the best. After we had that beautiful repaving job, I thank you for that. So first, I think they call it Tasmarack, before they put the sand and the tar down, my whole life. My parents moved there wasn't tar, there wasn't asphalt, it was dirt. So, yeah, I've been around. I agree with the water thing. I know there's a brook up there, but that has nothing to do with you. The state will have to come in. I know there has to be so many feet of boundary from either side of the brook that will have to be remained untouched. There's one little culvert pipe up on the end of Athens Street to drain what they're going to be driving over, so that's going to require to be all dug up, and I would imagine a substantial bridge now will have to be built, but it was just a culvert pipe that I crawled through as a child. And if they're going to cross the brook, and the plan says farther up, there's nothing. It's just woods up there. So there's another substantial bridge that will have to be put in. And yeah, all the way up to the top of Appleton Road and Prospect, those houses on Appleton Road, we used to call it skunk cabbage. I don't know technically what it is, but we'd go in there and play Army, end up with mud up to our knees, killing skunk cabbages as we're playing soldier. It's wet. It's wet. And the safety on Appleton Road and Route 20, it's bad. So you really have, if you just downsize it, blend it in with the neighborhood even. 4 stories, where in the world did that come in? Nothing in the neighborhood. Behind my houses, they built some 3-story things. That was way back. But 4, wow. No. It all comes down to someone wanting to make a big buck and getting a really good monthly check coming in the mail. So that's my concerns, and that's my observations of probably the oldest person on Appleton Road continuously living there. I thank you.
Thank you so much. Anyone else want to share their concerns?
On a Trash Street, 32 Prospect Street. Obviously, the water's a problem. We've been one of those ditch diggers to try and keep it out of our yard. I'm also concerned with water in another sense, that some of us still have wells. So, I mean, I don't know, and there's, I'm pretty sure, ledge down there, right? So if they're going to be blasting, I am a little bit worried that they'll be cracking that ledge and draining away my water, and then I'm going to have to pay for water. And then just, I know that people have kind of touched on it. 4 stories. So now I'll have a towering building in my backyard looking out as I swim in my pool. It doesn't seem like it makes sense. It doesn't fit with the rest of the neighborhood, especially where we're all used to having woods and a quiet space to have traffic, more traffic, I should say, and big buildings where they don't really seem to belong. Thank you.
Thank you.
Blasting was just mentioned for the first time. So I created a handout for you all. It's called Facts About Blasting. Over on, right underneath that TV, before you leave tonight, feel free to grab one. If there's not enough, I can actually post this on our website, and you can access it from there, or you can email me. I'll share my email address, and I can send it to you. So I just want to, it's premature in the process, but blasting is probably the question that we've had the most since we started talking about this Athens Street project, not only from the residents, but even from some of our elected officials have asked questions about blasting. So I just want to take 1 minute and just kind of talk about the blasting. So blasting is regulated by what's called 527 CMR 1, which is the Comprehensive Fire Safety Code in Massachusetts. So the permitting for any blasting that would take place in the town comes from a permit from my office. So the fire department would issue a permit to a competent, capable blaster, licensed, all of those things. Prior to any blasting taking place, your properties would have what's called a pre-blast survey. So your properties, your foundations, all of those things are inspected, photographed, all of those things. I can tell you that, and I shared this with Mr. Carpenter, for those who don't know him, one of the members of our Board of Selectmen. Blasting is something that people get very concerned about for good reason. But I also want to, kind of let people walk out of here feeling maybe good about something, as well relative to this project, is that the amount of blasting complaints that we may receive on a particular project, I can tell you that greater than 95% of those complaints are later unfounded, okay? So the blasting industry is highly regulated. And not only is it highly regulated, but it is also monitored by us. So every time a blaster is shooting a blast to do something, there is a representative from the fire department on site when that blast takes place. It's measured with what's called a seismograph. I don't want to get into the details, but I did provide a couple of quick bullet points, and then there's a QR code here. That QR code will take you to the state website, which has information that's resident-specific. It's residential concerns about blasting. So it is a concern. It will most likely absolutely be a part of this project. But I can tell you that, many of the complaints, doing this for a long time, I can tell you that the blasting company that we actually worked with on the Albert Street project, that other 40B project, although it's a different developer, I've said it before, probably one of the best blasting companies and blasters that I've worked with in my 30-year career. They were extremely responsive, extremely professional. They do not want blasting complaints any more than they want you to have issues. So I just want to put, some level of peace that if this were to happen, the fire department is heavily involved with the blasting. We will come out with the blasting company. Our fire prevention division, we will be on those pre-blast surveys. We will be taking photographs of your properties for our records, because if you do believe you have a problem, the fire prevention office is who you're going to be making that complaint to. We're going to be the ones investigating that complaint. And again, we want to make sure we have as much documentation as we can for you, and we would encourage you to take the same photographs that we're taking, right? We want to make sure that you're covered as well. But the blasting companies, depending on what one they get, but again, we know who they are. We know what, kind of who needs to be monitored. But like I said, it's a very highly regulated industry. And I can tell you that 95% of the complaints that come in, they're unfounded in terms of damage. People have concern, a lot of times people get concerned about the hours of when they're going to blast and blasting all day and all those kind of things. The reality is even on a busy blast day, they may fire 3 shots in the course of a day, because it takes a long time to drill into that ledge, set that stuff, there are hours in between blasts. So it's not like continuous blasting every 20 minutes for an 8-hour day. That's not how it works. So, and typically, when they're going to shoot a blast, the first blast of the day is usually between 10 and 11 in the morning. It takes them that long to get set up and get all of those things. So we are here to answer any blasting issues or questions that you have. I think that this will be very helpful in giving you all at least some surface information in terms of sort of how it's regulated and some of the commonly asked questions. But I just wanted you to all know that it's heavily evaluated by the Fire Prevention Office, and we have your best interest in mind as well, which is why we will work with you on those pre-blast surveys to make sure that all of that paperwork and information is documented appropriately.
I also would like to comment on the last actually, a few people have mentioned it already, regarding the height of the floors of these units. And I have spoken to the state, and I have spoken to several residents, And that's where we really encourage your participation. If this gets approved at a state level, your participation in the ZBA meetings, because it is not unreasonable to request or to fight for 3 floors rather than 4. 4 it's a massive unit. In some cases, it's right up against your residential properties. I think it's extremely reasonable to demand and request that. And I think that process, whether it's you and town staff that go, can help to alleviate some of the issues that can be the result of this 40B coming in. But that's if it gets approved by the state. So I just want to mention that. Do you have any questions?
Hi, Jen Frederick, 79 Appleton Road. At the last ZBA meeting, they were discussing the traffic engineer's results, and that was for the Perry Place location. And I was just wondering, is there a way to advocate for a different traffic engineer when that process starts? Just because his data was based off of pre-COVID and then COVID, it just didn't add up. So I didn't know if that's something that the board can address, or if it's solely the developer chooses who they choose. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a good question. I did watch that meeting afterwards, and I saw that, and the numbers were way off, and it didn't make a lot of sense. So I called the state regarding that issue and asked if we have the right, whether it's a resident or the town, to ask for an additional study, a more updated study, and he said absolutely. So that is just something we need to remember when we get to the ZBA, if we go to the ZBA, because I saw the same thing, and they were just so different. I don't think there was any real accurate information that we could hold on to on that discussion. So thank you for bringing that up. Anyone else? Sure.
Hi, Craig Falkengren. I live on 29 Eddy Street, which really isn't very close to the site. I live on a dead-end street. This particular complex wouldn't affect me as much as it will the people on Appleton Road. But growing up on the hill since 1974, I lived on Phoenix Road, then I built a house on Eddy Street. I have a few questions. Infrastructure, has anyone talked about the sewer line, the water line? I do contracting site work, and you have to have a sewer main or a water main that can handle this kind of flow. I haven't heard anything talked about that. My other question is height restriction, which you did bring up. I know there is a height restriction already, and 4 floors definitely does not meet the height restriction. You know, I definitely taller. 3 is a possibility, probably with a flat roof. And the other thing is, I feel for the people that are going to live in the backyards. They bought a house. 40B is great. Ronnie's just sold the property. Put it somewhere where there's commercial, not where you're going to affect the lives of people that take their real estate liability now, what they pay. What's it going to do with the value of their property? And definitely the hill, the access, the road. There's nothing talked about widening a road, which you can't do because you're going to take the people's front yard. I don't have a problem with it in the right location. Also, the wetlands, does the state go by the same wetlands as a homeowner if they were putting, or a developer putting 3 houses? Because I know that area is very wet in there, and I know that's a big issue everywhere you work today. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that I haven't heard, touched on as far as those things. I know it's preliminary stages, but knowing that land, I can't even imagine there's room for those houses without going different. Do they have different rules than the guy that wants to put a house in the woods, as far as the wetlands and whatnot? But, I mean, I think there's got to be a lot more study. I mean, I know the sewer department, they could tell you about the, what it can handle for infrastructure. You're adding 192 homes. That's a lot of flow. That's a lot of flow. And the other thing I hear is 300, 400, 500 trips a day. You take 192 units, I know not everyone is going to have 2 vehicles. That's almost, let's just call it 200 for easy math. That's 400 vehicles possible. Even 300. If they go out, they got to come back in. So that's not 300 trips, that's 600 trips a day. You know, I just think there's a lot of things here that the town really needs to look at for the people more so in that neighborhood than even me. And that's why I wanted to speak.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
In regards to the water and the sewer, if this does get approved at the state level, those discussions will definitely happen to determine if it's feasible to have this size development in that area as it relates to water and sewer. I know there's another one that we're working on right now that the developer is, being asked to improve some of the lines. So those things may happen as well.
Would the contractor be responsible at that point?
In this case, yes. I don't know about Athens. Each site is different, but in the case that I'm talking about, yes, they were going to be responsible, but it's ongoing dialogue with the town, and we're going to be very actively involved. We have a lot of the same concerns you do. So in regards to water and sewer and even the drainage type, the water even on the hill, I've discussed with Mr. Busby from the state, and we've talked about it. Because the property is so big, he did agree to look at the water issue because there's only so much you can see from a Google map, which he said when he was at the site meeting. I heard him say it, and I had the conversation with him because we don't need additional drainage issues. When they wipe out those trees, the water needs to go somewhere, and we're very concerned about that as well. So a lot of the issues you're talking about haven't really been discussed because we don't know yet. But those will all be discussed if this gets approved by the state, but it is being brought to the state as our concerns, so they know right away. We are concerned about the water, we're concerned about the drainage, we're concerned about the sewer, we're concerned about the roads, we're very concerned about the intersection. So all those things, so we have our comments, what we're getting tonight is all yours. So which is just almost like, it just reiterates what we already feel, and I think us as a group hopefully can make a difference, so I appreciate your comments.
One other question, with that stormwater management, they'd have to abide by that too today, correct? The stormwater management systems that when you take so much permeable area?
I am not sure. I do know from the training that I went through that they have to follow state law versus town. I don't know if anyone else, can you speak to that, Joanna? Do you know any different?
So I believe that they would have to adhere to the state standards. We have our own standards, and I'm not exactly sure where that limitation is. We have our own stormwater regulations, and I'm not sure if our stormwater, or if the 40B process can be circumvented, can circumvent the stormwater regulations that we have in town. Because the way that I understand it, both wetlands and stormwater, they're relying on the state regulations only and not, not the town's wetland regulations.
Thank you. Sure.
So again, I'm at 37 Appleton Road, 37 Appleton Road. I don't know my own address. When my youngest was young, my car was totaled on Route 20, trying to turn up Appleton. And then about 7 years ago, my car was totaled in my driveway on Appleton. I don't know if my house actually made it on the news, and people saw it all over the state because a car had come down Appleton, hit a car coming down Appleton that sailed into my driveway, and then it went in, which I totaled my car. So my question is, for everybody here, how many of you have someone in your house that has had a car accident in our neighborhoods?
Can you just keep your hands up for a second?
How many of you have had a car accident in our neighborhood?
It's not, but it doesn't match with the rest of the numbers, like.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, we've had 3 accidents. I forgot about the third one.
What are they saying?
It's probably like Hamilton, Prospect, Eddy, 20.
Right.
Because
Meeting House,
those are the numbers, and they don't.
Phoenix. They're from, yeah.
The fire stations, when they redid the Prospect
So
Street.
true. Yeah.
Regardless of this, I think we should tell the state that they need to look at that Apple Street.
Thank you.
Would you come?
Thank you all.
Good question. Darlene?
Thank you so much. That was actually a great visual for us. We have a picture of it as well, and we have the numbers. I really appreciate that.
Hi, I'm at, my name's Maxine. I'm at 7 Athens. So I missed the site meeting because I was at a baseball tournament. So I'm hearing a lot of things that obviously has been covered. Again, one of the accidents was T-Bone just a few years ago, they ran the red light on 20, and me, my husband, and my son were all in the car. So obviously that's a huge concern for all of us, because now we're gonna have, again, let's estimate around 400 cars. Everybody's kind of covered that. I know obviously there's, based on the site plans that my neighbors have all provided us, it's literally gonna be in some people's backyards. I'm across the street, and my house doesn't face the street. It actually is perpendicular. So my whole backyard is exposed to the street. So I kind of have one of like the unique situations where like my neighbors across the street are gonna have people looking into their backyards, similarly with me. At 4 stories high, 3 stories high, I mean, even just cars driving down, it's a bowl. It's a literal fish bowl, my backyard. So that's another concern is, privacy. Like, am I gonna get a permit that's gonna be able to give me at least like an 8-foot fence to be able to kind of have a little bit of privacy in our backyard? And another major one is, I was informed that they did, I guess like a site visit to check the water, but they did it during the drought. I work from home, so interestingly enough, I saw all of it. And they didn't really walk the area at all. I think it was like November 29th or something like that in November. And I was home and they didn't walk. They went to the end of the street and just kind of looked around. We were in drought and the water is not what they kind of estimated it at. Like right now, obviously there's water, but even through the summer, it can be August 1st and there's still water draining like in the paper path, like the paper street that's between like, there's still water that's constantly draining. So when we first bought our house, the big concern was water, and we had a rainy season. That following spring, it was like the spring of COVID, and we took a lot of water in our basement. And I'm really super concerned, obviously, with that, because then we had to do mold remediation and rip up all the sheetrock that was damaged. So obviously concerned with that, but my biggest concern is, what is the timeline of a buffer? How long are they going to give us once, let's say they approve this, to make those complaints? What if in 3 years, now we're seeing water issues, now we're seeing these things? Like, how are they going to address these long-term issues when everything is kind of like, okay, we're gonna, I don't know, put a culvert in so it doesn't flood my neighbors, because they're the ones that are gonna really feel it because they're the biggest part. But what if in 3 years? We're seeing as everything settles, that changing and stuff like that. So I do have a concern on that. Like, is there a buffer? Do they have that? As well as, if you mentioned blasting, I actually just went through this with blasting in Westboro. They did the site visit. They said they did the site visit for blasting, and then with no homeowners home. So my mother's house and our neighbor's house, they never even told them that they were coming to do it. And then everything, all the damage that happened after the blasting, they were like, yeah, we're not covering it. Because it was inside the house and we didn't know about that and stuff like that. Like, I just want to make sure that we all are protected within, 5 years from now as things kind of settle.
Thank you so much. We are going to have to look into what we do 3 years down the road. Because it's going to be privately owned, your private homeowner, but there's a very good chance that as things settle, there may be additional issues. So again, I would encourage everyone to go to the ZBA to try to mitigate issues, but there's some issues we're just not going to know until, yeah, great question. Thank you so much.
Let's have another question. I don't want to take anybody else's turn since we're on seconds right now. All right, so I had 3 additional questions, just piggybacking off of what was already discussed. So it's my understanding that the street, Athens Street, is a private road and that it's owned by the same entity that owns the property that's for sale. So the Athens Street and the project, the 40B project. How does that work for the existing homeowners that are on that street? What are our rights to access to that street if it's privately owned and by the town? Because with 8 houses on it, the road's crumbling, and it's my understanding that the town doesn't own it, but the town is responsible for cleaning it. But ultimately, when that road deteriorates, who's responsible for maintaining and replacing that road? What rights as homeowners do we have for access to that road? That's one question there. With respect to the water, I can attest to this living on the corner of Athens Street in Appleton. Days after a rainstorm, there is a river coming down Athens Street, comes right in front of my house, days after. And the same thing on Appleton. And my house is at the corner where these 2 rivers meet. There's a lot of water. There's a lot of water. And then my other question for you is, I have a neighbor that came up and spoke previously that lives off of Appleton, and it was my understanding that the wetlands behind Appleton are protected because there is some kind of species of lizard or salamander or something there that's endangered. So my question is that since all this stuff kind of comes back down from the same, kind of originating from the same place, has anybody tested to see, is that same endangered species of salamander or lizard that's present in the wetlands behind Appleton, present 700 feet at the end of Athens Street? Because it seems like really kind of not that hard to imagine that if you have some kind of species 700 feet over here in wetlands, you probably have it in the other direction and in wetlands also. So
Thank you so much. It's a good question. We will definitely look into it. It makes sense that it would be in both areas, so we will have our Conservation Commission definitely look into that. I wanted to know if perhaps anyone here has any pictures of the water issues that you've had, because if you do, I'd love... Perfect. Okay, so I need to send this to the state next week, so if you could send, especially as things melt, if you could send it to the town manager's office, that would be great, because, and I'm sure even like the river that you say, when we met with them at the site, when we met with the state, he said he walked through, and we questioned that as well, and when we did, he said he looked at Google Maps. So there's a big difference between looking at Google Maps and seeing that water, and I'd really like to show him any pictures you may have and include it as part of our package.
Sorry to take any more time. Again, my name is Shannon Lipko, but I thought of something else as I was listening to my other neighbors, specifically with respect to the traffic concerns. And living in a day and age today where so many of us shop online, particularly Amazon, Walmart, there's DoorDash, there's Grubhub, there's UPS. I'm just trying to highlight as well for the town that not only would you be dealing with a significant volume of individual vehicles, but also commercial vehicles would undoubtedly start to inundate that intersection and up there into the residential neighborhoods. I'm not really sure our roads, I mean, I can attest to Old Meeting House Road being a shock strut test road as it is. I'm not really sure they're going to be able to handle that. In all seriousness, because we are dealing, I don't know what the demographics would be, but especially within younger generations, that's how we tend to shop. So I just also wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Great point. Thank you. Sure.
Hi, Nancy Giangrandi, 10 Athens Street. In regards to the water that you were just talking about, the town came down and sanded Athens Street 3 times on the day of the site meeting because people from the state were coming, I guess. And if the water drains off the yard next door to me, off of my yard, down my driveway, and we had a skating rink at the end of the road. Thank you.
Thank you. Is anyone else, please?
My name is Kevin Doré, and I live on 44 Prospect Street. Couple concerns. Again, most of them have been already addressed. But I went to this so-called site visit where I left work early, took some time, went home, got my gloves, got my boots, and I was very disappointed with the state. As we stood there, we looked around. There was no 4-story complex. We did not set foot in the snow. We did not set foot anywhere where this so-called river is, which, yes, I've hiked the woods with my 5-year-old, my 3-year-old, who would both be dramatically affected by this 40B complex, never mind just the school system. So my biggest concern is, one, can we petition the state for another site visit? And two, is there any way we could get like an environmentalist that maybe Auburn or the residents will financially pay to inspect this land to get a actual realistic view of the land itself? Because I feel like the state uses Google Maps and they really don't care what our concerns are. They have their agenda and they'll do what they want. And that's about it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I will talk to Mr. Busby and see if he will come out again. If he does, I will definitely make sure everyone in this room knows. Just on that point, if you can make sure that you've signed in on the clipboard that's gone around the room so that we can continue to get in touch with you as things transpire. We also have the 40B an area on our website that has information. So as documents go out, whether it's this one that I'm working on now or anything in the future, you can access it there, or you can always call my office. In regards to an environmentalist, I will definitely look into that and see what we can do. We do have, and I've spoken to him, grave concerns about the water in that area and the issues. So we will definitely stress that, and we'll work with Concom. I know they've already been involved. There's already been a meeting. So we will work with all of them to see if we can get some additional results in regards to conservation and the environmental issues in that area.
If I can collect the clipboards, if everybody has signed in.
Hi, everyone. My name is Megan Roach. I'm 16 Mayfield Road, so I am probably maybe the only other person in the room that's not in a butter. But I just wanted to comment quickly, and I know Ms. Vecchio had mentioned this in the beginning, but for people who weren't here, 2 weeks ago, maybe, or a couple weeks ago, we did a 40B informational session with Judy Barrett, who is a, for lack of better terms, a 40B expert. She is not employed by the state. She does not work for the state. She is an independent consultant that the town has hired, that the town has requested through the ZBA that we bring on a consultant that is at the cost of the 40B project that is currently going on now. The developer is responsible for that cost. According to 40B, we have the right to do that. And so Ms. Barrett came and did a presentation about 40B. So for anyone in the room who has not seen that, I highly encourage that you watch it. I am on ZBA, so we have been doing these hearings now for 4 years or 5 years, and that although I think overall some of the message was disheartening to town residents, it is very informative, and it explains what the ZBA, what the town can and cannot do. I think when you come to meetings, it's very helpful to understand what our parameters are. And then just to answer one of the questions from before about the permits and the waivers things, The applicant has the right to ask the ZBA for a multitude of waivers. If you watched the last ZBA hearing when we did the 40B waivers, there was maybe 20 or 25 waivers that were asked for. The legislation for 40B allows the applicant to come to just ZBA to ask for those waivers so that they don't have to go to all the other boards, because the nature of 40B is intended to make the process quicker. So if you go back and watch that meeting, they asked for waivers in regards to the wetlands. So I know that was Mr. Faulkner's question. They ask for that buffer zone to be limited. They ask for waivers on, in that particular project, they ask for waivers on numbers of garages. They ask for the setback in terms of where the garages stand. And some of the waivers we allowed, some we did not, some we continued to the next meetings. But the regulations that are in place for wetlands that the town has, the applicants have the right on any 40B to come to ZBA and ask for waivers. And they typically group them all together and ask for them to be done sort of in bulk, if you will. Typically, I would say, we address them individually. So if you wanted to watch, you could see what waivers we allowed on the last project and which ones we did not. But again, I think the training that we did, the informational session that we did with Judy Barrett, as a person who has to sit at that desk on that side during the meetings, and listen to the town residents and also listen to what we can and cannot do as the ZBA, it's very helpful to understand sort of the process and some of the rules. So that, I think, is posted on the town website, correct?
Yes, it is.
So I just encourage everyone to watch it. It's a very informational session. Again, I think it's a little disappointing, but some of it is what it is. So if you have questions on how it works or how it was originated, it's a very good informational session. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Amber Funtz. I live on 5 Athens Street. I feel like this is really loud in front of my face, but I'm going to try not to jump around, but I have a lot of questions, mostly based off of answers that you've given today. So in regards to blasting, when you said that the blaster that you work with for Albert Place, that they were one of your favorites, is the town allowed to request a specific blaster to work with if you really liked that one and felt like it was beneficial for us?
No. So all of the blasters have to be licensed by the state. The contractor can hire the blaster that they want. Now, and I can't honestly even think of one off the top of my head, but let's say that there was a blasting company that they hired that we knew was problematic statewide. That's a conversation I could have with Mr. Benacasa and say, we'd really prefer you to get somebody else, depending on what kind of problems that blaster may have had in other places. I could potentially deny the permit for that. But we don't have the ability right out of the gate to say, we're going to pick your blaster. But we certainly do have control in terms of who a permit gets issued to if we do not like, with good reason and a legitimate reason, we could always not issue the permit to that blasting company.
So as far as the traffic flow for our street, I don't feel like there's anything that I can say that has not already been said tonight. I mean, just the sign alone that was put at the end of Athens Street, letting people know about this meeting, I had to call about because the buses couldn't back up. Took her like 3 times, and she actually backed up onto Dave's lawn, onto the sidewalk and the snowbank in front of his house. And it was moved back, so they could try to work with it. It was difficult, but it just goes to show how narrow the street is. We can't even accommodate a sign. I'm assuming that there will be some kind of turnaround for the bus to be able to come down Athens Street. However, there's just not even room to be passing a bus coming down Athens Street. My family and I purchased a house in 2023, and it was like a fresh start for me and my kids on a dead-end road. they ride their bikes. My daughter walks halfway down the street by herself, like, because I wave to the bus, they see me, you know. These are things the state doesn't care about, but as someone who lives in the neighborhood, I do. And I am not a person who's going to be fortunate enough to be able to walk away. This is my house. We've invested everything I have into it, and it is not going to be the kind of neighborhood that I planned on raising my 3- and 7-year-old children in. So it's really unfortunate. I have watched the 40B training, which is very disheartening for residents, as Ms. Roach expressed. So when we're saying that our street can't handle traffic, is widening the street an option for them? I am not advocating for that at all. I'm just wondering, when we're saying this, what do they come back at us with? Because it is a privately owned street, and, you know, I'm not entirely sure if it is owned by the people who are selling the property to the developer, but that is my understanding. I know, as looking at my deed, I do not own the street, so we are questioning what rights we have there, but there just isn't room, and, you know, I don't see any way to mitigate that. Sorry, I have a checklist here. And I guess I'm a little bit confused, even after watching the whole 40B training, when they want to grant a comprehensive permit. So we raise all of our questions and concerns. Do they address and find remedies for legitimate questions and concerns before approving the project? Or is it approved with the conditions that you figure out all of these things with the town? Because it seemed that, looking at, for example, Perry Place, I did skim that, and there were concerns about traffic and environment, and it said that those needed to be addressed with the town. But addressed with the town and not happening are two completely different things. Like, what power do we have to actually stop them from doing something if they're granted a comprehensive permit?
If I may, the comprehensive permit that's issued through the ZBA, and I think Megan touched on this, those discussions come up there, and there can be parameters for the width of a road or sidewalks. Those things, if they're issues from the state and the state agrees that they're an issue, they are resolved typically through the ZBA process. And with our staff present, we are involved as well. But that's where all of the requirements are in the comprehensive permit. Some waivers are granted, others are not granted, or it's not granted with an exception, you've got to do this. At that point, the developer can then actually go back to the state for an appeal and appeal the ZBA's request. When I spoke to the state, they're open to anything that's reasonable that we would ask for from any other developer, non-40B. So safety, it's one of the things they keep bringing up, which includes sidewalks and the width of a street, is very important, and those are typically upheld as long as it's something that we require from everyone else. But it's more than just the width of a street. It could be anything, and any waiver that is not granted or partially required something, that's when it all happens, and we ensure through the ZBA that it happens.
Okay. The other thing that I'm really not sure that you can do anything about, but just food for thought, is the 40B thing is designed, they want it streamlined, they want it happening now. It seems like they don't want us to object to it, and the town gets penalized if they do. By meaning, when I watched the training, that if the process takes us longer than 12 months before they get their building permit after the comprehensive permit is granted, that we lose the count on the rental units. So this Albert Place is going to put us at you said 9% approximately. We're still not at safe harbor. And I mean, I guess I'm saying like it's not fair, it sucks, because there's, you know, there's Perry Place, there's ours, these things are getting piled on top, and we should already be very close to where we need to be, and what are we gonna do to say no? I really don't wanna hear that, well, we're just gonna try to get everything we can from them, but it's probably still gonna happen. When does the town say no? What power do we have? How do we speak to our representatives that we vote for to do something about this? Because the entire thing is built to try to force you to just let it happen because you get penalized if you don't. Whether it doesn't start on time because of the developer, whether it doesn't start on time because we're actually trying to make it better, like, that hurts us, you know, because the Albert Place site should be coming online, and now we have 2 other ones that are just gonna put us way over what safe harbor is. So I don't really wanna hear, how are we gonna, you know, make this suitable for our area? What are we gonna do to stop it? What power do we have, and how do we empower our residents and our town to get behind our representatives to do something to say no?
So that's a great question. We are feeling very similarly to you, because we are feeling, especially the Board of Selectmen, as you know, as well, are feeling, you know, the added 40Bs just keep coming. We can say no. We have spoke to them, and we argue locations and things that we need, or things that's not in the right areas. It is a law that unfortunately we have to follow. We don't have a lot of say. When we reach safe harbor, it's a game changer, and that's where our eye is on the prize. I know it's not an answer you want to hear, but we'll do everything we can in the meantime to mitigate. I do encourage you to talk to your reps. They're very actively involved. I spoke to Senator Moore earlier today, and I've spoken to Representative Paul Frost. They're very concerned. They're actively involved. You can talk to them as well. But I don't have a firm answer as to how to stop this, if this can be stopped. We are looking into, my board recently has me working with our town council on the feasibility of a moratorium. That I'm not sure if that will work, but we are looking into it. They gave me the direction. It's been given to our outside counsel. So they're looking at ways to try to stop this, whatever legal way possible. But in the meantime, if we can't, we're trying to do what we can for our neighborhoods right now. Like I said, after, I think it's after Albert Street, we'll be at 9.8%.
If I may.
10.
Yeah. So really, it's hitting that 10%. That's the only way we can actually say no and not get sued, or we can continue to fight it in the law, but it's just going to be legal fees. And every case that we've been able to find, with the exception of Amherst, for a moratorium has been problematic. So it's silly to just fight it to fight it. We have to fight it on legal grounds that we think can win. So zoning is something that we're looking into. But once they filed with the state, at that point, and again, this developer went direct to the state because he didn't want to deal with the boards. They just wanted to come in and railroad this. So it really is about making it as palatable at this point for this particular project. We can work with them if they're willing to work with us, but they don't have to. They only have to do their safety and their conservation. And at that point, I mean, they just run it down. That's the problem with 40B. We can fix it for the future, but they've already filed, so we're not going to be able to stop it because we don't like it. We have to get to 10%, and once we're at 10%, then we have the ability to force them through the boards in our local zoning, and that really is the key to this. It's to get to that number, and we say safe harbor, But Safe Harbor isn't going to help us at this point with any of these projects because of those stipulations and the nuances of that law, which really put us behind. So we're going to be at somewhere about 17% before these projects that we know about are done. And that's ridiculous, absolutely. So we can continue to fight it until they change the law. We have to follow that. So we can certainly recommend town council fight it, and we pay a losing battle. But we have to make sure we're meeting everything on legal grounds to protect the community. It's not just this project that the board's concerned with, it's the town. We're trying to work through this process. The Eastland Partners project, Albert Street, that went through before most of us were on the board. We've spent a lot of time and effort learning about 40B, and the more you learn, the more disheartening it is. And we're trying to make sure we're doing this to set the community up for the future and make sure that the developers that do come to town want to partner and want to work with us to make it better for the community. There is a housing shortage. This project, Athens Street, it's the project today, but really it's about the whole community as well. Until we hit that 10%, we are really in a tight situation.
Hi, my name is Michelle Koras from 30 Collier Way. I don't live anywhere near this project, but I'm wondering, who sets the amount, I'm looking at how many units that this particular project has that's going to meet or be part of the safe harbor. Could that number be greater so that we could meet a threshold? Like, could Perry Place be changed so that more of those units went towards the safe harbor?
If I may. So all of the units, so even though only 10% of the units are affordable with the 80% AMI, they're not really affordable, but all of the units of the entire development count towards it. So all of these units, so if there's 192 units proposed, but only 10% will be affordable, 192 will count towards that 10%.
So the total counts towards it?
So
Okay.
if I may, if the developers chose even to expand or add numbers to these projects, it doesn't matter. They've already filed with the state. So it will count at the end of the day, the total number that ends up being built. So again, when we say work with the developer, if for some reason they decide that it's not going to work for 192 units and they drop it down, which would be beneficial at this point, then that number is not 192, it's whatever they end up developing.
Whatever that number is.
So at this point, if any of the other projects wanted to increase their size, it doesn't help hit that number, the 10% number, any faster because these other projects have already been filed.
All right. My next question is, when you were talking about blasting, who's overseeing the wetlands when they're blasting? I understand from a fire perspective where you're going with that, but who's overseeing the wetlands while they're blasting? Because that should be another concern as well.
So any wetland concerns would fall under the purview of the Conservation Commission. So depending on where they're blasting and where that is relative to conservation, conservation would have to approve all of that. So that's something that we would work with conservation on, and they would have to weigh in on that permit.
Okay. So the wetland scientists, I thought that the walk was canceled on that Tuesday at 1 o'clock because of the ice storm. Sorry. So a wetland scientist is going to go out there and delineate the wetlands? Has that already been okayed? Is that going to be done?
So anything that has to do with conservation they would have to file. So
Okay.
you were on conservation, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So you know you have your local bylaw. The local bylaw is gone. So
That's what I was hearing. So
you have the
we're
state
not really
law, and
voting on anything.
I don't know of any project that I'm aware of in my time of service that we've had conservation and blasting in the same frame. But definitely, it should be brought up to Mr. Garland, the chairman, and I'm sure Dory and the staff will do that, so that we'll make sure that the issues are addressed.
Thank you.
George Moshe, 65 Appleton Road, Auburn. Been there 37 years. My question is for the police and the fire. The state is issue that we can actually help our cause by safety. Public, I think, are safe in our neighborhood, but I don't think that this project is going to help the whole neighborhood safety. So if the police and the fire department attest to this, will it have an impact? Thank you.
So I can tell you that going back to the Albert Street project, you know, as far back there, that's when we really started asking these questions about, well, what does safety mean? What are the things that you're looking at safety? There is an inherent expectation that anytime you build, whether it's a residential cul-de-sac or, 320 units, there's an assumption that there is going to be a public need for services. Now, the scope of that obviously varies from a residential neighborhood to a 320 unit. But all of these 40B projects, and I was up here actually just refreshing my memory on the math, all of these 40B projects will have an impact to both police and the fire rescue department in terms of call volume. Typically, statistically, not only in our community here with, and again, I hate to even say like projects because we really don't have like projects, but you have to get something as close as we can to neighborhoods like Forest Park Drive or, John Williams Drive, something like that. And then you have to kind of scale it, in terms of emergencies. But we can somewhat, with some certainty, predict what the call impact is going to be. So on the 320 units on Albert Street, based on statistical information, comps from other communities that have similar develops, comps from within our own complexes that we do, I estimated that we would have an increase of about 100 calls annually as a result of those 320 units. Now, it doesn't sound like a lot, but for a department that's already responding to over 5,300 emergency calls in a year, just with the 440B complexes that we have right now, we have roughly an estimated increased call volume of about 250 calls annually, right? Could be a little higher, could be a little lower, but that's a pretty good number based on data. Much like the schools, the state is not going to say, well, just because you may have fire and ambulance calls there, we're not going to stop the facility. Just like even though school children may be attending to schools, it's not a reason to stop the project. So, as I said earlier, we don't have a good answer. I shouldn't say we don't have a good answer. They don't have a good answer when we say, what is the safety threshold? What does that mean? Is it, frequency of emergency call volume for the total community? Again, all of these buildings, the one thing that they don't skirt is the building code or the comprehensive fire safety code. So there are no safety measures that are allowed by state law to be skipped from a building perspective. So that takes a lot of my concern. I certainly have other concerns, but it's not like I'm trying to fight to have certain safety requirements in a building kept. Because that's not, the buildings will be sprinklered. They will have to comply to 100% of the comprehensive fire code and 100% of the Massachusetts State Building Code. So that takes a lot of the safety kind of stuff right off the top. But to trying to get them, to get us to say, or to get them to say, what does that mean? What is a safety thing that would cause pause for you to say, oh, well, maybe we should reconsider that? We don't have that answer, because they're not providing it. But, like I said, on these units, both the Perry Place and this Athens Street with 190 units, I anticipate that would give that would give us an approximate call increase of about 60 calls per development. So roughly 60 times a year, you could anticipate to see a fire and EMS vehicle navigating Athens Street to go to that complex. You know, in my experience and in my professional opinion, that's a realistic number when you have a complex like that, as dense with that kind of a population. It is going to generate fire and EMS emergencies.
But from what you've heard here about the safety issue on Route 20,
Yeah.
Acton Road, the light, the police department, the number of calls, accidents, does that have an impact?
So I hope it does, and I thank you for bringing that up, because it was something that I was going to say to you at some point before we left here tonight. So let me back up just a little bit and talk about the Prospect Street Fire Station location, because I think that those two play into this conversation. So when we were looking originally at the Prospect Street location, there were many people that said it's a very dangerous intersection. We don't think that it's a good location for the fire station. And, you know, I've been responding to emergencies in this town, you know, for 30 years. You know, my first job was working for the private ambulance company that did 911 service here in 1992. So I responded to many of those motor vehicle accidents at Route 20 and Prospect Street. What has dropped the crash data, we worked with the state, we looked at the police department, and I've said this publicly relative to the fire station project. Route 20 and Prospect Street specifically used to be a very dangerous intersection. It is not as dangerous as it was before. Every intersection is inherently dangerous, okay? When you look at the crash data from the 90s and the early 2000s, before the major roadway work was done with the turning lanes, and what they did was, and I forgot who it was, I think it was you that mentioned, on Appleton, when you're driving eastbound, and you have that little blind spot in the road, the same thing existed at Route 20 and Prospect Street. Right around where the old driveway was for Chuck's Steakhouse, the first driveway if you were traveling eastbound, the driveway to turn into Chuck's. Just before that, before they did the roadway construction, there was just a little bit of a hump in the road that you actually lost visibility of the Prospect Street intersection right there. There was that split second where you lost the intersection. And then by the time you came over that hill, if there was somebody either blowing a light or something going on, it was too late. And that's where a lot of those accidents came. I'm not going to mention it tonight, but I can remember the call that triggered the reconstruction of the Route 20 and Prospect Street intersection repair. When they came in and they put the turning lanes in, and then they actually shaved and they brought the road down, so now that's a clear line of sight. So when you mentioned that, sir, I made that a note here. Traffic was in my letter that is going to the state. But I'm going to include this piece, and I'm going to talk about, because again, the state is the one that reconstructed that intersection. I'm going to bring a comparison between the Appleton Street intersection at Route 20. I'm going to bring the comparison of that intersection to the Prospect Street intersection, because the same thing essentially applies. You have that, and in some cases it's actually worse, right? Because the steep on Appleton is worse than Prospect Street. The sight distance when you're looking westbound is not as good as it is on So in some respects, Appleton is not in as good of condition in terms of an intersection as Prospect Street. But the state came in and made significant repairs and improvements to Prospect Street, which, you know, whether people want to believe it or not, right, we respond to the calls, we see the data. Since that Route 20 and Prospect Street intersection, the crash data and fatal accidents has dropped dramatically, and that's a fact, right? But it would not have dropped if not for the state coming in and completely reworking that intersection to make it safer. And that intersection is about as safe as it can be on a major highway like that sees that kind of daily traffic. But it is going to be my suggestion when I craft my response that one of the things that the state should take into consideration if they were to allow this project is the state should require the developer, and listen, I think the state as I've been sitting here tonight listening to this and with the amount of people that raised their hands, those are staggering numbers, right? And, you know, some of those things we may not always respond to, so we don't know, but that was a big image when 25 people raised their hand. Regardless of this 40B project, I want to work with the police department and look at our crash data for that intersection, and I think regardless of this project, I think we should jointly be sending a letter to the state, at least going on record saying that they need to consider changes to that intersection just like they did 20 years ago to the Prospect Street intersection. So, that will be in my letter. Now, whether or not that makes a difference, unfortunately, I don't know because the state has not been able to communicate what their safety threshold is. It's a question that I'm going to continue to ask. I'm going to continue to push. Somebody needs to give me an answer in terms of what is it that you're looking at when you're talking about safety.
One other thing about Appleton Road and the intersection, the electric road light poles, the whole light, you have to now put your nose of your car past that huge pole to see who's coming from your left. You can't see it.
So I want to ask you this, I want to ask you this question because I noticed it the day that I was leaving the Athens Street thing. Depending on where you park on Athens, does it not trigger that light? Yes. So I think the steepness, and I can work with our DPW director and we can get a hold of somebody at District 3 Traffic. It seems to me like they need to look at the adjustment on that center because I'm not sure if a combination of the angle of the street and how that thing is viewing, depending on where you park, I'm not quite sure that it's actually picking up the cars and cycling the light in the right way.
Coming up is the same way.
Coming, if you're coming from across and crossing 20? Okay. So we'll reach out to District 3 Highway and have them look at that. I happened to notice it that day. It seemed like I was sitting there for a while, and it was just one of those things where I'm like, oh, I don't know, maybe I lost track of like the light cycle or something, but it seemed like I sat there for a little bit. So we'll work with our DPW director and we'll bring that to District 3's attention, and we'll see if they can come out and take a look at that.
I had a question, like when you guys did the site visit, at that point, the parcel of land on Athens Street was not sold. It was in some kind of state of pending. What's the status of this now? Did that property close?
No.
Not that I'm aware of. We're not aware that it is closed.
So no, in the documents, it states that they have a purchase and sales agreement, and I do believe there's contingencies in there, meaning if the project is to move forward, that they would continue with the purchase and sales. So it gives the developer the option not to purchase should this get denied.
Okay, I have a follow-up question with that. So that property, I'm sorry? Oh yeah, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Me again. So my question was just, if the sale hasn't closed for that parcel of land, I just had a theoretical question for you. Privately owned, my understanding is the family that currently owns it, that estate, the family's owned it for decades. Theoretically speaking, they haven't developed it because it's wet. It seems like it's a problematic piece of real estate. If they were to donate it to the town and it became your property, would that kind of eliminate that piece of property from being considered? Like in the world of just theoretically, like if they donated it to the town as green space, would that be open for sale by the town potentially, or would you guys hold it?
Yeah, so if the town were to own the land and they donated it with stipulations, we'd follow those stipulations. If they wanted to donate it to the town with no stipulations, it would be something that would be discussed, future development with town meeting, potentially voters, but it really just matters who owns the land. If this developer didn't have a purchase and sales agreement, then this wouldn't be a development that we could discuss.
I hear you there, but it's been, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, they would have to donate it with a conservation restriction on it. So when they donate it to the town, that restriction would prohibit the town from selling it because it is conservation land.
Yeah, I guess my question's more rhetorical, or if maybe somebody knows some of the heirs of the family that make decisions regarding that parcel of land, they could pass that on. But if they were to donate it to the town, they could write off the fair market value for that piece of real estate on their taxes over the next X amount of years. So, I mean, if they've been sitting on it for this long, and they're obviously selling it because they want the money, they could potentially get the money in the tax return by donating it, and then it doesn't disrupt the neighborhood. I don't know if anyone on the board or the town has maybe courted that idea with the landowner. It seems like they've been here for a long time. They've developed a lot of real estate in the neighborhood, and they might want to leave that as a legacy to their ancestors, just as a thought, and then everyone wins. Conservation, the traffic, the green space, us as neighbors, and then they still get paid. They get to write it off on their taxes. Just trying to think out the box here if they haven't closed on the deal yet of like what else could be done to maybe help preserve that area.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Stratton Vitakos. I want to thank the fire department and the police department for our 55 plus. There's a few of us here. I came up now because I hear so much about what you just mentioned. I know projects out in Charlton, Dresser Hill with conservation. There was a turtle that was becoming rare, and the state put a hold on a development my friends were involved in. It involved blasting. They had 3 houses up, and it froze because of... So if you go back in this 17 acres, and I know the owner's out of state, I mean, there's a lot of wildlife back there. There's a lot, I mean, we can give you a list of that trail from where we live, Prospect Street, over to this 11 point whatever acres. So I'm thinking out loud. I saw some on Amber. You're awesome wherever you are. Oh, you're right there. I'll talk to you. So the listing went on the market, went for $825,000 in October. It's been on the market for 110 days. And to your point, I don't know how it went from availability to under agreement that quick. There's usually a flag for contingency. Now, I know with a Chapter 40B, maybe they raced right to under agreement because it's money. I get it. But as a real estate agent, it had to be flagged contingent so we can really get into this and digress more, in my opinion. But to flag it under agreement, if you look at the listing sheet of this, buyers to do their due diligence, that's a great phrase, we've used it for years, to do their due diligence, to do their own plot plan, to check everything out. They don't have the time. Somebody comes along like a 40B, that they're gonna scoop it right up, and that's just what happened. This hasn't been a price drop, it's been sitting under agreement. I'm just skeptical. And I don't know, I know you've heard of Windmill Estates. You're all familiar with Windmill Estates? Go right up Prospect Street. It's the first right, and that's our 55-plus development. 13 buildings, 2 owners under 1 roof. And again, we thank the police and fire. We've needed everything from the beginning. It was Emerson Realtors that I was with. We built that all up, and Kevin Maha, God rest your soul, it was a year yesterday. Anyways, I'm just throwing it out. Bullet items right now, I agree. That could have been looked into donating. If that price had gone under $825 and $500,000-$600,000, I would have been the first one to recruit and get that.
The document's listed, I think, for 700 something or 675 or something like that.
I get all the, yeah, no,
I'm sure you said that.
so I'm just throwing it out, food for thought, and I thank everybody. But I just had to speak on behalf of a half a dozen of us that live in Windmill Estates. A lot of Auburnites, a lot of veteran guys that live over there, well-known. But I think we've got to slow this down somehow, that's all. I've been down south, I came back, and I'm ready to look into this some more. I feel for the people on Athens Street. From my corner, I'll stop, but the plot plan, the 86, right on the bend, You walk down the corner, we have a big catch basin. We've got there's a lot of clay back there. It has been for years. And if you start trailing down that, right where they abut, on Prospect Street to Windmill Estates, get ready. Once that goes in, the water flow is going to really go. And I'll wrap it up by saying, when I moved back from South Carolina 13 years ago, I'm in Auburn, class of 75. So anyways, and I came back, and I needed a place to rent. I bought at Meeting House Hill condos, right? And I thank the police again. It was so bad. I used to get up at 3 in the morning. I had a wholesale business in Boston, always been. And Appleton Road is like a ski. It just keeps going. And one morning at 2:30, now granted that's 13 years ago, but thankfully the armed police were out there. I called, I said, you gotta stop me. I'm gonna go right through down where the Outback was initially. So I got a little off track there, but there's a lot of porous clay back there. I dealt with clay in South Carolina, real estate, very porous. You're gonna need 6-footers that are gonna reinforce. And who knows how the water's gonna flow? I'm just saying, what if, so. But the due diligence on a listing sheet to sell that property, I think it was just steamrolled right to you gotta make the 10%, I get it. But terrible spot to really do it. And I'll leave it at that. I'd love to talk some more, but thank you to the.
Thank you.
Sorry, I just have one more thing. You mentioned the intersection, obviously we went over safety and everything. Is there any way to maybe put because I know the data is only registering the actual accidents, which again, fantastic. I mean, horrible that all of us went through it, but it's not really a good accurate reading of how many near misses. So we have dash cams. I'm pretty sure a lot of these, every new car has a dash cam, but is there a way to possibly put a traffic cam? Because when I had my accident, we found out that there was actually no cameras. But to kind of at least use that data to be okay, so while we have only responded to, let's say, because I hear the sirens going all the time, but 100 accidents, there was 300 near misses. And then you're gonna add in 400 more cars, let's say, and do that data, because the state is money-based, right? They want their money, they're gonna do what they're gonna do. To hear that, all right, this is what is legitimately going to affect them. You guys are going to be responsible for putting, I don't know how many millions into redoing this road. That might be something that they're I don't want to deal with that, because again, they're all money-based. So is that something, an option, possibly a traffic cam to
Yeah, we can absolutely ask. Just quickly, well, by way of the accident data, and like you said, it only accounts for the accidents that we respond to and that we write reports at. But going back 10 years, there's 68 accidents at that intersection. Appleton and 20, yep.
68. Yeah, and I mean,
over the last 10 years. This year, obviously, we're only a couple of months into this year, so that data's a little bit skewed, but that's where it's at. And, I know with these projects, they use, a percentage, how many vehicles are going to be in how many trips per day, and I'm not exactly sure who generates those numbers to make those calculations by, but to the fire chief's point, and what I've learned from attending meetings, if you let Chief Coleman talk long enough, he'll make all your points for you. So,
You're welcome.
So in essence, a lot of what he said, we're on the same page, as far as, it's impressive how educated all of you are about these projects, and, there's not a single person up here that doesn't have empathy for every one of you. But a lot of it, like you said, it's money or data-driven, right?
Yeah.
And we try to be a little bit more, or as precise as we can be with our data, and let our data drive, our decisions and our deployments and things. So I think it's a great idea to ask for it. I don't know that we can compel them to do it, but I think it's an excellent thing to include.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I mean, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we're doing everything we can to prevent things, we just,
They want to see. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have a new driver, so that's kind of like the concern. He has a dash cam. He was actually in an accident just a few weeks ago, not there, interestingly enough. But it's like every day. We're like, you know, the rule of thumb when you're driving, I mean, I don't know if everybody else does it, is you wait 5 seconds. So unfortunately to everybody else who honks, we all have to wait because we've all had near misses. So I think that kind of data is something that they should probably see, especially if that's what, if the idea of adjusting the road to match Prospect, they will look at that from a monetary standpoint. They're gonna be like, well, now we have to address this. So that might be a consideration.
Good point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir?
Good evening, and thanks again for this meeting. My name is Paul Payne, and I live at 21 Old Meeting House. I'm here at this meeting, and I'm learning a heck of a lot. First of all, I'm very impressed with the presenters, people with questions, good questions, cogent questions. It's like we're asking for Hurricane Sandy to come back. I mean, that's seems to be the feeling that I have. But specifically, I wanted to ask, earlier in the meeting, somebody said or mentioned the fact that manufactured housing could be put into that 9.8% to bring it up to 10%, and therefore safe harbor. I'm asking, is somebody said that no?
Yeah, so I think it was me in the beginning. I had read a statement from Representative Frost, who tried to get some of the mobile home units to go as part of the affordable housing, and it was shot down.
Okay, well.
On the state level.
It's going to be a tremendous fight to stop this thing. It's a runaway freight train. Okay. I thank you for your help on this. And one last question, if I could. Is there any way of kind of pooling all the inputs from police, from fire, from environmental into a master website or something that would be sponsored by the town?
Yeah, so all of this data that we gathered tonight, in addition to all the department heads, will be forwarded to the Board of Selectmen for their Monday meeting. We're going to put it online. We have a special area on our front page now for 40B, unfortunately, because it's just become such an issue, so that you'll be able to go on there and actually see the item. So we'll send it to the board on Monday, and I'll send it out by the deadline is March 18th.
Again, thank you very much.
Absolutely. So do we have any other questions, concerns? Sure.
Mark Lindblom, 1 Eames Drive, Auburn, Mass. Thank you all for coming. Adam, thank you, hiding in the corner as well. So there we go. So I live at 1 Eames Drive. So that is, I'm going to address you, I'm going to address them as well, if that's cool, because most of the stuff, I feel horribly bad for you guys for what's coming down the pike if this crap goes through. Straight up, I'm completely against the 40B process and how it goes. All the game floating numbers done by third graders in terms of traffic studies, the floating numbers that are done in terms of, you came up with 17%, I came up with 16.9% doing hours of math. And it's pretty crazy that they're still trying to push this garbage through here. So for those of you that are saying, what's a 4-story building look like? Go up Albert Street, drive up there, drive in there, it's open. You will see what a 4-story building looks like. I don't understand why they were approved to be put into this town, but that is the monstrosity you guys are going to be dealing with. People asking about salamanders, turtles, ferns. Again, go up to that site or look at the site from Walmart. It's the same developer that is doing that project. Look there and look at all the ground that is gone. I think we went to 6 Conservation Commission meetings. regarding the Albert Street project back in 2017 to 2019, somewhere around there. Again, talking about lady slippers, talking about the yellow spotted newt, which is what you're talking about specific ferns, talking about specific size old growth trees, all that stuff. Nothing matters when you blast it down 60 feet, 80 feet down to flatten it out, to make it become a gravel yard that's done. I'm a District 5 meeting member. I'll give you my phone number if anybody wants my number. I have a ton of information regarding this 40B stuff. Chief, I hope it is nitroblasting that does the job, because again, Eastland will just blow a horn. You cannot hear a horn when they blast. You're not going to hear a boop when you're in your house, your windows are closed, all that stuff. You're not going to hear it. What you're going to feel is just a massive shake that goes on for about a minute and for about a quarter of a second or so. But it is a very violent shaking. That's what we have up there on all the ledge that we are having. Nitroblasting did come up. They did send a third-party inspector that went through all the houses on Eames Drive, Blaker Street, and Tinker Hill. They would come up every time that they would blast, wherever the closest house would be. They would put the seismic box to figure out what that would be. Do we see water issues up at our place? Yeah. Do other people on Tinker Hill see water issues? Yep. Have we brought them up? Yep. Has anything been done? The developer says that they haven't got there yet. But one thing I'd fight for you guys to fight for is fight for a buffer. These developers don't care one bit. They're going to put a house right up against your property line. They're 10 feet on one side of my property line and touching my property line on the other. We've had multiple discussions. Now, luckily, I own enough land. I own a decent amount of land, so I can see it only from one part of my house. But I'll tell you, walking outside when all you would see is trees, trees and woods, to walk outside now and have 60 windows looking at you is devastating, and it sucks. Just to make sure that I'm not putting any gray area in there. So again, yeah, go up there and see what it is. Now, does the select board realize that even with all of the the engineering work that went done over there, do you know that Eastland was still had a lawsuit brought against them up back in November of 2023 for all the water runoff that came into the property? Because they kept on flooding Albert Street and Blaker Street. If you just scan through this the middle page, you'll see that the EPA came up and went after Eastland Partners and sued them and fined them and had them come back up. And for like the third time, they've had to rip up the intersection of Blaker Street and Tinker Hill. Blaker Street and Albert Street to put in much larger manhole covers and go into other people's properties for that. This was because, again, you have their 40B engineers that come up with all this stuff. The water flow that would be flying down there, coming up and over the embankment, down there, would run right over all their manholes, go down their sidewalks, and it would get into their, and then it would just completely fill Albert Street and go down our street, flood my son's house, and flood a couple other people's houses. Made some phone calls. They came back up and they verified the fact that, yeah, you guys have a right, and they went after them. No offense, I didn't mention to the town. I just got pissed off and went after them myself and took care of it that way, because I've been dealing with this for 7 or 8 years. The other thing I'm going to feel bad for you guys about is Gary is fantastic over there, all right? If you guys have issues with people, call him, because he will put fines on it. He will fine them. We did that with Gary multiple times, and then I finally got upset. I brought all the managers, all the heads up, and we had a long meeting saying, we're done with this. with you guys showing up at 5:30 in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, deliveries at 6:15 in the morning. Deputy Chief, you guys are fantastic, but I know that's not your job. So unfortunately, calling the police department, correct me if I'm wrong, which I'm sure you will, is calling them up and saying, hey, can you guys come and verify that these people are, these developers are working outside their hours? That's not really something that you guys do. The biggest thing we came up with was videotaping them. And now I just go, every time they do it, I have no problem. I'll just call I will call the developers, the president of Eastland Partners at 5:30 in the morning and tell him to get it done, and he gets it done. He doesn't like it, but that's the way it is, and then I don't have to bother Gary. Let's see. Phone comes back around. I have my other notes there. I'll give you my number. Again, not saying you guys need it, but if you guys have issues with it, I try to take this stuff seriously. I work with a lot of the other people in that side, and I'm the low man on the totem pole in terms of town stuff. But my name's Mark Lindblom. It's 774. Yeah, I'm waiting. I've been fighting this for years. So these guys are fantastic, but if there's other stuff you want to do, or again, if you want to come up and see what this impact is going to be in your backyard, come up to my driveway and check it out, because you can't miss it. So 774-262-4712. In respect to blasting, what we did, again, Eastland Partners would not, we talked to them numerous times. Guys, we can't hear your foghorn. We can't hear your air horns. Can you please let us know? We can't hear. So eventually, they got my point that I wanted. They eventually got my point across to them that I'm not dealing with having the house shake and all the neighbors calling me because they can't hear it. So what they ended up doing was they put everybody on like a 25-person text, and that gentleman that ran Nitro would send out a message about 20 minutes before almost every blasting and say, blasting at such and such. Because you can put your cats away, you can put your dogs away, you can tell your kids, because again, you're not gonna hear an air horn if they do that. So, let's see. That's fine. Now, okay, I'm just gonna grab this real quick. I got some more notes. I just wasn't sure if you guys were aware that had happened with Eastland. All right. Deputy Chief, did you guys ever get the $500,000 grant that Eastland said that they were going to give you guys back in October of 2017 of 2018 for a repeater up there?
That's all the emergency communications things are built into there's a state law that requires them to have all those things. As far as the actual grant, I don't know if it's a grant, but I believe we used.
And I was just wondering if there was discussion of it at a selectmen's meeting way back when. I just didn't know if that actually went through.
The simulcast, you talking about the simulcast?
Yeah, so originally there was, I want to say the $500,000 was actually the total number, correct? I think the total lip was $500,000?
That was before my time, but
Yeah, so I think the total lip was $500,000. There was about 200,000 of that was earmarked towards radio. Ultimately, that was removed, and it was negotiated somewhere else in the lip. Because that's built into the building code. So I can tell you all of our communication issues were addressed outside of that lip through the building code.
Gotcha. All right, and then the last thing is, when you're talking, so we had the issue, massive traffic issues of construction vehicles not coming down Albert Street, but coming down Tinker Hill, Maple Street, Tinker Hill, and Blaker Street, especially now, and thank you, once they redid the roads, which have been fantastic. But we got a lot of those vehicles. Again, been fighting with them, the developer themselves. They're putting up signs, trying to keep all the traffic going down Albert Street. They widened Albert Street and made it that way. That's where the traffic should go. But they had an issue with the light at Albert Street that for years was the same thing. It would have that lag. So you could sit there for one iteration, you could sit there for 4 or 5 iterations. Made numerous phone calls. Darlene, is it Glenn? Is that your engineer? Glenn or Greg? One of your town...
That might be mine.
Oh, Joanne? Okay, sorry, wrong one. So he was very helpful. So they came down after I finally got a hold of him. He came down and within a week adjusted those lights. So now you're not sitting there with 10 cars piled up before it would let you go. So whatever he did on Albert Street worked fantastically.
You would have had to talk to Mass DOT, but
Yes.
I'll ask
But he got the point across to them. So, but thank you for letting me babble on. Thank you, everyone, for letting me babble on. Have a great day.
Thank you so much. So we're going to wrap it up here. We'll do a few, come on up.
I always believe in saving the best for last. Al Rafferty, Paul Street, Auburn. Since brevity is the soul of wit, I will be brief. You need to organize. If you fight this as individuals, you will lose. There's three solutions to this situation. One is the process, ZBA, the state, fighting the 40B. The second solution is political. What politicians can you pressure to get what you want? And then the final solution is the courts. You have to file a lawsuit. That's it.
So, again, thank you all for coming out tonight. This was extremely helpful for all of us here to gather the information that we needed to get from you. If you have any other questions, concerns, comments that pop up in the next few days, please let my office know, and we'll keep you apprised of everything that's going on. We'll post everything on our website, and you can always call my office. Thank you so much.